The thunder cracked like gunfire over the parched plains of New Mexico. A storm, sudden and vicious, rolled across the desert, battering the Crawford estate with a fury unseen in years. Windows rattled in their frames, and horses screamed from the stables as if sensing something far darker than weather. Inside the dim-lit farmhouse, 17-year-old Lily Crawford awoke with a jolt, her eyes wide and unblinking, her breath shallow. She sat upright in bed, drenched in sweat, her long black hair plastered to her cheeks. But what tore through the silence was not just a scream, it was a voice not her own. "Henry, no, the child, she's still inside." The voice was older, raspier and foreign to the Crawfords. Her mother, June, burst into the room, oil lamp in hand, her face blanched. She stopped cold in the doorway, staring at her daughter, who now clutched her head, muttering things in frantic, broken sentences. "Fire, please, not my baby. Why won't you stop?" "Lily," June whispered, her voice cracking with something deeper than fear. She stepped forward, setting the lamp on the bedside table, and reached to touch her daughter's cheek. Lily looked up at her, no, through her, and then suddenly collapsed into June's arms, unconscious once more. If you're intrigued by the strange and the supernatural, subscribe now to uncover Lily's eerie tale. What happened to her that stormy night would unravel a web of secrets buried decades deep. The next morning the skies cleared as if nothing had ever been amiss. The Crawford ranch looked the same, but the girl within it did not. When Lily stirred again, it was close to noon. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains, casting golden stripes across her blanket. She blinked slowly, turning her head as if unfamiliar with her surroundings. Her eyes scanned the room, pausing on the rocking chair, the carved chest at the foot of her bed and the rosary hanging on the wall. Everything was where it had always been, yet it all felt foreign. She whispered under her breath, "Where am I?" Outside, her father, Thomas Crawford, cursed as he tried to fix a broken fence the storm had torn through. He didn't notice the way the wind shifted near the house. He didn't see the girl behind the window watching him, with eyes that seemed older than her years. Over the next few days, the changes were subtle but unsettling. Lily's handwriting began to alter. Her smooth cursive, once practiced and flowing, was now rigid and archaic, shaped in unfamiliar patterns. When asked to say grace at dinner, she recited a prayer no one in the family recognized, one spoken in a different dialect, with inflections foreign to the region. Her dreams became vivid, overwhelming. She spoke names in her sleep: Henry, Clara, Ruth, names neither parent could trace. She sketched strange buildings, Victorian in design, surrounded by trees and fog. One morning she handed her mother a drawing of a 2-story brick house with a broken shutter, saying, "I used to live there." When asked where it was, she simply shrugged and said, "Tennessee, I think." But Lily had never been east of Santa Fe. Her mother grew quiet. She stopped speaking of the changes, though her eyes lingered longer on her daughter now, searching for something, anything, of the child she once knew. Thomas, on the other hand, denied it all. "She's just shaken by the storm. Happens to girls sometimes. They get into their heads." But that explanation didn't hold when Lily, in the middle of supper, suddenly dropped her fork and whispered, "There was a fire. I died in a fire." The room fell into silence. June's hand trembled as she picked up the fallen utensil, setting it back beside her daughter's plate. Thomas stood up, left the room without a word. That night, Lily stared at the ceiling for hours. Sleep eluded her. When it finally came, it came with fury. She dreamed of a burning house. She stood on a staircase, smoke billowing around her. The wallpaper peeled from the walls like dying skin. A woman screamed her name, Margaret. A baby cried from another room. And standing at the bottom of the stairs was a man in a brown coat, his eyes void of mercy. In his hand, a lit lantern. "Don't do it!" she shouted. But it wasn't her voice. It was that rasp again, older, hoarse with grief. He threw the lantern. Flames roared up the steps. The woman, Margaret, grabbed the child and ran, but the fire was faster. Lily screamed herself awake. The smell of smoke lingered in her nostrils even after she sat up in bed, gasping for air. But the house was quiet, still, and yet she was certain she hadn't just dreamed it. Something had changed inside her. Something had been woken up. Before the storm, before the voice that wasn't hers spoke from her throat, Lily Crawford lived a life shaped by silence. The Crawford Ranch, situated 10 miles from the nearest neighbor and twice as far from any town, thrived in the dry isolation of New Mexico's desert in 1904. It was a place where the wind sang through the mesquite trees and the sun painted everything in tones of bone and rust. Lily was the only child of Thomas and June Crawford, a man hardened by war and land, and a woman worn by solitude and disappointment. Their home was plain, functional, a 2-story structure built with sun-bleached wood and practical hands. Love, if it had ever bloomed here, was long buried beneath layers of duty. She spent most of her days in the attic, where the light filtered in through a single pane, and dust motes danced like ghosts in the air. There, with scraps of charcoal and brown paper, Lily sketched. But what she drew didn't belong to the desert or her life. Her drawings depicted tall, mist-covered trees, steepled rooftops, narrow alleys, and rivers that flowed through cities she had never seen. She'd never even crossed state lines. Her mother would sometimes peek into the attic and find Lily hunched over, whispering names under her breath as she sketched, names like Clara or Adeline, names foreign to the Crawford lineage. When asked about them, Lily would simply say, "They feel familiar." At 17, she was neither child nor woman, trapped in a place where girls were raised to become wives, not wanderers. But Lily had always felt the walls closing in. Her father's expectations were fences just as real as the ones he hammered into the earth each morning. "You don't need books," he'd said when she asked for a novel. "You need a husband." Lily never answered. She didn't know how to explain the aching in her chest, the weightless sensation she sometimes felt while staring at the hills, like she was meant to be somewhere else, someone else. Despite the silence of her life, there was a presence in Lily that seemed too large for her frame. She noticed things others ignored: the twitch in a horse's ear before a dust storm, the shift in temperature before a person entered a room, the sorrow buried in her mother's gaze. Sometimes she would speak truths she shouldn't know, details about people's pasts or thoughts they hadn't voiced aloud. At first, June thought it was intuition. But intuition didn't explain the way Lily sometimes stopped mid-sentence and spoke in a cadence too old for her age, or how she knew a neighbor had lost a child before the news arrived. The animals were the first to change around her. The family's dog, Jonah, once her loyal companion, began to growl when she entered the room. Chickens scattered at her steps. The horses, usually calm, bucked and trembled when she approached the stable. Lily felt it too. In the mirror, her reflection lingered a moment too long. Her eyes, blue as the desert sky, seemed deeper now, clouded with memories not her own. When she touched her face, it was familiar and foreign all at once. The first time it happened, the real fracture, she was washing linens in the back of the house. Her mother had gone into town, and her father was working the eastern field. She bent over the basin, scrubbing with soap, when suddenly her hands froze. She looked up, and the landscape around her had changed. No longer desert, but green hills. No longer a basin, but a child's dress stained with soot. She blinked. The vision vanished. Her heart pounded in her ears, and she stumbled backward, knocking over the basin. It happened again a week later, then again and again. Each time Lily emerged shaken and winded, as though she'd traveled miles in seconds. She began writing things she couldn't remember starting, pages filled with looped handwriting that wasn't hers. Once she found a note on her nightstand. The fire took everything, even the baby. She hadn't written it, but the pen lay beside the page, the ink still fresh. She tried to confide in her mother, but June only pressed her lips into a line and turned away. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and crimson, Lily sat on the front steps and watched the desert stretch out before her. The wind carried a faint scent, smoke, but there was no fire, no clouds, just the emptiness of a world she didn't belong to. "I don't think this is my life," she whispered. The words didn't feel like a confession, they felt like a memory. And somewhere inside her something stirred. The journal was bound in cracked leather, its corners worn, its pages yellowed with age. June found it tucked beneath a loose floorboard in Lily's attic room while sweeping. At first, she thought it was one of Lily's old sketchbooks, forgotten and dusty. But when she opened it, the contents made her knees weaken. Two distinct handwriting styles filled the pages. One, the curling, narrow script, belonged unmistakably to her daughter. The other was unfamiliar, older, confident. Some pages bore dates far beyond Lily's years. Others had no dates at all, only vivid descriptions of places and people June had never heard of. Clara cried again last night. I told her the fire was a dream. I lied. He watches the house from the ridge. I see his shadow even when he's not there. June read until her hands trembled. The entries spoke of fear, guilt, and something far more disturbing. A fire that had consumed an entire home and the lives trapped within it. She didn't tell Lily she'd found the journal. Instead, she brought it to Thomas after supper. Her voice hushed. He read it silently, his jaw tightening. When he finished, he closed it and handed it back with a grunt. She's writing stories, that's all, he said. Maybe she'll be a writer someday. But June saw the way his hand trembled as he lit his pipe. She didn't press further. That night, Lily's sleep was anything but peaceful. She thrashed in her bed, whispering in a voice that rose and fell with desperation. At times it wasn't even English. She muttered in Latin, phrases her parents couldn't understand. June stood outside her room, listening, heart pounding. The lamp in her hand flickered as the words grew louder, more intense, until finally they stopped. Silence fell like a dropped curtain. The next morning the preacher came. Reverend Hulberd was a tall, sharp-featured man with piercing eyes and a voice that seemed to crack like thunder when he spoke. He had baptized Lily when she was a baby and had scarcely spoken more than 10 words to her since. But now he stood in their parlor, clutching a worn Bible, his voice low and urgent. She's been marked, he said to June and Thomas. There are things that dwell near the veil between this life and the next. Sometimes they slip through. She's our daughter, June replied. She was, he said. Now she may be something else. Lily sat on the back porch while they spoke, unaware, or perhaps pretending to be. Later that day, her father nailed the door of her room shut from the outside. You're not sick, he told her through the wood. You're being punished. She didn't respond. June brought her food in silence, slipping the tray through a gap in the door, never meeting her daughter's eyes. But one night, Lily's voice broke through the stillness, trembling and strange. Mother? June paused, hand still on the tray. There's someone else inside. The words hung in the air like smoke. June walked away. As the days passed, things began to change more rapidly. Lily's memory faltered. She forgot simple things, her birthday, her mother's face, the sound of her own name. Sometimes she'd sit in the corner of the room and whisper to herself in a voice not her own. I begged him not to light it. I screamed, but he did it anyway. My baby. I can still hear her crying. Thomas refused to acknowledge it. He spent his days in the fields, his nights in the barn, hammering wood, building fences, anything to drown out the sound of what his daughter had become. But June watched the light fading from Lily's eyes, and more than once she caught her daughter staring at her, with a look so foreign, so ancient, it made her blood run cold. Then came the night of the mirror. Lily shattered it. June heard the crash and found her daughter on the floor, surrounded by shards. Blood ran down her palms, but she smiled. I saw her. She was inside the glass. That was when June stopped pretending. There was no explanation left that fit inside the world they knew. Something was happening to Lily, something beyond storms or isolation, or the burden of growing up. There was another soul pressing against the walls of her mind, and it was only getting stronger. Lily no longer recognized the sound of her own voice. Each time she spoke, it emerged altered, slightly deeper or strained with unfamiliar emotion. The cadence was wrong, like a piano tuned for a song she'd never learned. At first it frightened her, then it confused her. Now it simply made her tired. Margaret, she said aloud one morning, tasting the name on her tongue. It felt right in a way that Lily didn't. Her reflection in the broken fragments of the mirror seemed to agree. The girl who looked back had Lily's hair and cheekbones, but her eyes carried a heaviness. Memories too old, grief too deep. The kind of pain only a mother would know. Margaret. That was the name that kept rising from her mouth when the world slipped sideways. In the half-dreams, in the cold sweat, in the aching pull inside her chest, Margaret. It repeated like a hymn she'd known in another life. She began seeing her, not in visions, but in memory, not Lily's memory. She would sit in silence and suddenly recall details with impossible clarity. The smell of pine wood floors, the sound of a grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the feeling of lace gloves tightening around her wrists. A man's voice calling her name, not Lily's but Margaret's. A child's laughter, a fireplace crackling warm, then screaming, smoke. Lily started to speak of these things as if they had happened to her. She told her mother one morning, "He didn't mean to kill me. He meant to kill himself. But we burned first." June dropped the porcelain cup in her hand. It shattered. Later that same day, Lily wandered into the barn and climbed into the loft. She remained there until sundown, not speaking, not moving, just watching the horizon. When Thomas found her, she was humming a lullaby neither parent had taught her. He asked where she learned it. She turned slowly and said, "Clara used to sing it with me," then paused. She was 3 when she died. Thomas stepped back. The walls between Lily and Margaret were thinning. Sometimes she woke up on the kitchen floor, flour on her hands and bread half kneaded. Other times she'd find herself outside the house at night with no coat, barefoot in the frost. Once she addressed her father as Henry. "I'm not Henry," he growled. Lily blinked, confused. "Of course not," she said, then added, "But he looked like you." June no longer brought the journal to Thomas. She read it herself page by page, searching for a way to understand. Each passage seemed to confirm the same truth. Lily wasn't alone inside her skin. She confronted her daughter one evening after supper. "Do you know who Margaret is?" Lily looked up from her plate. Her hands trembled. She's in me," she said. "She remembers things I don't. She cries when I sleep. She lost someone, a daughter. I feel it like it happened to me." June knelt beside her. "What does she want?" Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. "To be heard." That night June stayed by her daughter's bedside, holding her hand as she drifted into a restless sleep. Hours later, Lily sat upright and spoke clearly. "You're not June. You look like her, but she's gone. My name is Margaret Bell. I was born in 1840 in Knoxville, Tennessee. My husband's name was Henry. He murdered me and our child in 1865. Then Lily collapsed. June wept silently, her hand still clutching her daughter's. In the following days, Lily's behavior became erratic. She refused to answer to her own name. She insisted she had to return to Tennessee. When her father tried to restrain her, she fought back with surprising strength, clawing and biting until he locked her in the cellar. June begged him to release her. He refused. "Whatever that thing is," he said, "it's not our daughter." But June wasn't sure anymore. She watched as Lily, or Margaret, began to fade in and out like a broken transmission. Some days she spoke like herself, drawing in the attic, asking for tea. Other days she sat in silence, rocking back and forth, speaking of burned wallpaper, of Clara's bedtime stories, of betrayal and blood. The more Margaret emerged, the more Lily seemed to disappear. Each possession left her weaker. Her eyes dulled, her skin grew pale. Her voice rasped with exhaustion, and Margaret's voice grew stronger. Inside her, a woman long dead had found breath once more. By the time autumn arrived, the townsfolk had begun to talk. At first it was murmurs passed between women at the general store, uneasy glances when the Crawford name was spoken. Then came the avoidance, the way neighbors crossed the street when June entered town, how the preacher's wife clutched her child tighter when Thomas passed by. The rumors twisted quickly. "Witchcraft," someone said. "Possession," said another. A boy claimed he saw Lily standing in the cemetery after midnight, humming to herself beside the graves. A woman swore the Crawford barn caught fire and extinguished itself with no rain in sight. And when 2 cows were found dead on the Wilkins farm, their eyes open and frozen in terror, the blame circled back to the Crawfords like vultures to carrion. Someone painted the word witch across their barn door in red clay. Thomas washed it off, but it returned 2 days later, darker, thicker, this time etched into the wood with a blade. June stopped going to town. Thomas returned only when necessary, and even then he kept his head low. But isolation could not protect them from fear, especially when it lived within their own walls. Inside the house, Lily's voice changed again. Not just in tone, but in knowledge. She began speaking about people she couldn't know. She asked her mother about the widow in black with the scar, describing a woman June had only ever seen once, 15 years ago, at a funeral in Santa Fe. She spoke of events that happened before her birth. A flood in 1887, a duel that ended in bloodshed on the church steps. Reverend Halberd returned, summoned by neighbors who now insisted that divine intervention was the only hope. He arrived at the Crawford ranch unannounced, clutching his Bible like a weapon. June met him at the door and refused him entry. He ignored her and stepped inside. "I will not stand by while the devil takes root in this house," he said. In the parlor, Lily waited. Her face was calm, too calm, her hands folded in her lap. When Halberd approached, she looked up and said, "You're not the first to try, you know. The last one drowned." His steps faltered. "I am here to cast you out," he said, raising the Bible. Lily smiled. "Go ahead." What followed was not like any exorcism Halberd had prepared for. The air grew thick, the windows fogged, and the fire in the hearth extinguished itself. He read from the book of Mark, his voice shaking, while Lily laughed, a low, sorrowful laugh that made June cover her ears. Then Lily rose to her feet, slowly, deliberately. She took 2 steps forward and spoke in Latin. Not broken, imitated Latin, but fluent, rhythmic, ancient Latin. Words Halberd had only seen in theological texts, words no farm girl from New Mexico could possibly know. He dropped his Bible. Lily picked it up and handed it back to him. "She's not a demon," she said, her voice clear and steady. "She's a mother." Halberd fled without another word. After that, the town's fear turned into action. Children were forbidden to approach the Crawford property. The general store refused to sell them goods. One night, a stone shattered their window, a note tied to it with 3 words, "Get out now." Thomas boarded the house shut and sat by the front door with his rifle across his lap. June wept quietly at the kitchen table, her daughter silent upstairs, lost in a world that wasn't hers. And still Margaret stirred. June caught Lily staring out the window one evening, whispering, "They let him walk free. He lives in the light, while I rot in this darkness." "Who, Margaret?" June asked. Lily didn't answer. She just turned and walked back to her room. Later, June found the journal reopened, its pages filled with fresh writing. "He doesn't believe I'm real. But I remember the smell of his jacket, the way the lamp glowed before he smashed it. I remember the scream, Clara's scream. It won't stop." Thomas threatened to send Lily away, to an asylum in Santa Fe. June pleaded with him not to. "She's not mad," she said. "She's haunted." He didn't reply. But that night, he stood for hours in the yard, staring up at Lily's window, his fists clenched at his sides. Inside, Lily no longer wept. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She watched, waited. And somewhere deep inside, Margaret watched with her. Elias Blackthorne arrived in the dead heat of late October, dressed in a long grey coat and carrying a suitcase scuffed by years of train travel. He introduced himself as a researcher, an academic from Massachusetts, with a particular interest in unusual cases of personality displacement. His tone was polite, precise, but his eyes, ice grey, analytical, missed nothing. He had heard the stories, of course. Whispers reached even the universities in the East. A girl in New Mexico who spoke of a life long ended, who wept for a child she'd never born. He had read dozens of accounts like it, but something in this one, something visceral, called to him. He knocked on the Crawford door just past dusk. Thomas opened it, shotgun visible behind the frame. I don't want press, Thomas said flatly. I'm not press, Elias replied. I'm here to help your daughter. Thomas didn't move. Elias glanced past him. I don't charge and I don't make promises. June appeared behind her husband. You can see her, she said. 1 hour. If you upset her, you leave. Elias nodded. Fair enough. They found Lily in the attic, seated near the window, hands folded in her lap. She didn't look up when Elias entered. She was humming again, low, slow, something mournful. Elias pulled a chair beside her and waited. You're not from here, she said after several minutes, still not looking at him. No, he answered. My name is Elias. You're here for her, she said. Yes. Lily finally turned her head. She's not evil, you know. I didn't think she was. This answer seemed to surprise her. Most came with oil and crosses, demands for prayers or purging. Elias only offered curiosity. He asked gentle questions, her dreams, the moments she lost time, the memories that weren't hers. Lily answered, but sometimes she didn't remember having said anything at all. Once she blinked mid-sentence and began reciting lines from a nursery rhyme that hadn't been taught in decades. Elias noted it all, the cadence of her speech, the dilation of her pupils, the shift in her posture. He tested her with languages, French, Latin, German. When he spoke Latin, she responded without pause. Vox tua non est tua, he said. Your voice is not your own. Et tamen auditum est, she answered. And yet it is heard. He grew still. There were only 3 other documented cases where the subject demonstrated linguistic access beyond their education. 2 had been hoaxes. The 3rd ended in institutionalization. He stayed in the guest room that night, notebook in hand, scrawling theories by candlelight. The next morning, he interviewed June and Thomas separately. June spoke in whispers, eyes darting toward Lily's closed door. She confessed to believing her daughter was no longer alone, perhaps not even dominant. She says things about people I've never told her. She sings songs from another century, and she knew how I lost my sister when I was a girl. I never spoke of it. Not even to Thomas. Thomas, by contrast, dismissed it all. She's sick, that's all. Head's gone soft. Maybe you academics like to call it something else, but it's still madness. Elias made a note of the father's rejection. Psychological denial could be a defense against grief or guilt. That afternoon, Lily asked to walk the property. June agreed with Elias in quiet tow. They wandered to the northern field, where a dead tree stood alone, scorched by lightning years ago. Lily stopped there and touched its trunk. I dreamed of this tree before I was ever born, she said. Before you were Lily? Elias asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she crouched, brushing away dirt near the roots. Beneath the surface lay something half-buried, a rusted button, round and black with 4 holes. She turned it over in her palm. This came from Clara's dress, she whispered. Elias leaned in. Who is Clara? Lily looked at him then, really looked at him, and something behind her eyes shifted. Her spine straightened, her expression hardened. When she spoke, her voice was not Lily's. She was my daughter. The word struck the air like thunder. Elias said nothing. He only nodded, his breath slow. He believed her now. That night, he sat alone on the porch and stared at the desert stars. Somewhere behind him, a soul long buried stirred inside the body of a 17-year-old girl. He had come seeking proof, and now he had it. The next morning, Elias sat across from Lily once more, notebook closed, eyes fixed on hers. This time there was no scientific distance, no clinical curiosity, only a man who had begun to believe. Tell me about Margaret, he said. Lily didn't hesitate. She was born in Knoxville, 1840, married young. Henry Bell. He was charming at first, handsome, educated. But war changes men. What war? The one that broke the country in half, she said softly. He came back from Virginia with scars no one could see. He drank, he shouted, he broke furniture, and sometimes bones. Elias waited. He lost his job, took to gambling. Margaret tried to keep the house upright for Clara's sake, but money ran dry. Food became thin. He blamed her for everything. Lily's hands trembled slightly. One night she told him she was leaving. She had a sister in Chattanooga. She packed a bag for Clara. She planned to go at dawn. Her eyes closed. He found the letter. June stood just outside the room, frozen in the hallway, listening. Lily's voice changed, deeper now and hollow. He didn't hit me that time. He waited, said nothing. Kissed Clara good night. Then when we were asleep, he locked the doors, poured kerosene, lit a match. The words came without pause, without breath. I woke to smoke, screaming. I carried Clara down the stairs, but the bottom was already gone. Fire licked the walls. He was outside, watching. I screamed his name. I begged. He stood there, lantern in hand, watching his family burn. Elias's heart pounded. Why? He whispered. Because he wanted us to suffer. Because if he couldn't have us, no one would. Tears slid down Lily's cheeks. I died holding her. I felt her heart stop before mine, the heat, the silence, then darkness, and then nothing. No one spoke for several minutes. The air felt heavier, like the past had thickened it. Elias broke the silence. And now? I don't know where I am anymore. Sometimes I'm Margaret. Sometimes I'm Lily. Sometimes I'm neither. Elias carefully set down his pen. What do you want, Margaret? To be seen, Lily said, to be remembered, to make him answer for what he did. June stepped into the room. Is that why you're here? She asked gently. To get justice? Lily looked at her, her voice small. Wouldn't you? That night, Elias sat in the parlor, rereading the journal June had given him. He marked every page Margaret had written. The language shifted when she took over, more precise, formal, older in tone. One passage stood out. If there is anyone who hears me, don't let him be forgotten. Don't let Clara's name disappear like ash. He closed the book. He couldn't walk away now. Later that night, Lily wandered outside again. Elias followed, careful not to startle her. She stood beneath the dead tree once more, staring up at the moon. He's still alive, she said. Elias frowned. Who? Henry. That's impossible. No, not him, but his blood, his line. He never paid. He started again. Somewhere else, they all do. You want vengeance? No, she said. I want the truth to matter. Elias considered her words. He had come to New Mexico chasing a story. What he found was a buried life, a silent witness, and a cry that refused to be forgotten. Margaret Bell had not just haunted Lily, she had survived through her. The days that followed were strange in their calm. Lily no longer resisted Margaret. She no longer denied her presence or begged for understanding. Instead, she listened. She allowed the voice inside her to speak, and in that silent agreement, something shifted. Hostility softened into coexistence. Elias observed the change closely. The fractures in Lily's behavior had once been sharp and chaotic. Now they were measured. Margaret no longer interrupted without cause. When she emerged, it was to speak clearly, with purpose. At times she would look at Elias and say, "She lets me come through now. She knows I won't hurt her." June noticed it too. Her daughter seemed steadier, even when she was not entirely herself. The rage that once crackled beneath the surface had dulled into sorrow, and through it, a new connection began to grow. One morning, Lily took her mother's hand and said, "I know what she lost. I feel it like it's mine." "She was a mother," June whispered. "She still is," Lily replied. But not all was peace. Inside her, Lily remained divided. Margaret's thoughts were heavy, laden with pain, bitterness, yearning. Some nights Lily dreamed of fire so vividly that she woke coughing, the smell of soot clinging to her hair. Other times, she'd look in the mirror and forget which girl was staring back. "I don't know who I am anymore," she confessed to Elias. "I remember things that never happened to me. I miss people I never met. And when I'm alone, I feel her ache, not in my mind, in my bones." "You're merging," Elias said carefully. "Two souls occupying the same vessel. If you continue, there may come a point when one cannot survive." Lily's face tightened. "Which one?" "I don't know." She didn't answer. The question haunted her. Later that week, Thomas made his stance known. He stood in the kitchen, fists clenched, jaw tight. "She's fading," he said. "This ghost is swallowing her. If we don't act, we'll lose Lily for good." "What would you have us do?" June asked. "Banish her? Tear her out?" "If that's what it takes. She's not hurting anyone. She's not our daughter anymore." Elias stepped in. "You're wrong. Lily's still in there. She's stronger than you think. And Margaret, she's not a demon, she's a mother who died screaming. Maybe if someone had listened then, she wouldn't still be here." Thomas turned to him. "You don't know what it means to lose a child." "No," Elias said, his voice steady. "But I've spent my life listening to the echoes of those who have." The argument ended there, but the air between them stayed tense. That night, Lily came downstairs for the first time in weeks. She sat at the dinner table, her movements slow, deliberate. She looked at her father. "I'm still here," she said. He didn't reply. "I don't want to disappear," she continued. "But I can't shut her out. She's part of me now." Thomas stared at his plate. June reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. "What if you didn't have to choose?" she asked softly. Lily looked between them. "I already have. If I force her out, she vanishes forever. And if I let her stay—" "You vanish," Thomas finished. Lily nodded. Silence followed. Then June spoke again. "There must be another way." Elias listened from the doorway, his thoughts already racing, but he said nothing. The next morning, Lily sat in the attic with the journal open in her lap. She began writing, not as Margaret, not as Lily, but as both. "We are not enemies, we are not strangers. We are two broken halves of something whole, one alive, one dead, but both still aching." The decision would come soon, but before it did, they would have to face the truth of what Margaret had left behind and what Lily was willing to sacrifice to honor it. The decision came with the rising of a cold dawn. Elias stood at the edge of the Crawford porch, watching the sun bleed over the desert. Behind him, Lily packed what little she owned, a few dresses, the journal, a silver locket Margaret had described in vivid detail. June wrapped food in cloth and placed it in a worn satchel. Thomas didn't speak a word. They would go east. Tennessee. Not to chase ghosts, Elias had said, but to give one a name, a place, and an ending. The journey took them across plains and rivers, through towns that stared too long and said too little. Elias paid for train fare, made arrangements, deflected questions. Lily remained quiet most of the way, eyes always fixed on the windows, as if the land itself might reveal something long forgotten. When the train finally pulled into Knoxville, the air was thick with late autumn smoke and pine. The streets buzzed with life, horses clopping along cobblestone, shopkeepers shouting from corners, children darting between wagons. It was a world far removed from the Crawford ranch, but for Lily it was not unfamiliar. She walked the streets slowly, deliberately. "Here," she said at one corner, pointing. "There used to be a bakery. Mr. Madsen owned it. He gave Clara hard candy when she came with me." Elias looked around. There was no bakery, only a storefront selling typewriters. At another street she stopped again. "There's supposed to be a church here. Stone steps. Henry tripped once and broke his tooth. But there was no church, just weeds and a crumbling foundation. The city had moved on, but Margaret's memories hadn't." They made their way to the outskirts, to an overgrown patch of land just past a creek bed where Margaret's home once stood. Lily stepped onto the soil and froze. "This is it," she whispered. "This is where I died." The house was long gone, ashes swallowed by time, but the foundation remained. Stones cracked by heat, fragments of burnt wood buried beneath moss. June knelt beside a sunken beam and pulled out a small charred buckle. "It's real," she said softly. "All of it." That night, they stayed at a boarding house nearby. Elias scoured local archives. June cooked over a small iron stove. Lily sat alone, sketching from memory. Margaret's house, Clara's face, the fire. The next morning, Elias returned with a folded newspaper, brittle with age. He laid it on the table. Mother and child perish in house fire, 1865. The article was short, no charges, no inquiry. Henry Bell had claimed it was an accident, a faulty lamp. He had wept for the reporters and moved within weeks. He remarried, relocated. Elias turned the page. "There's more," he said. "A census record. A Henry Bell living in Clarksville with a new family. He lived to 72. Lily closed her eyes. "He never paid," she said. "He built a new life on our bones." Later that day, they returned to the ruins. Lily walked the perimeter, as if retracing Margaret's final steps. She knelt near what had once been the staircase. "She hid the locket here," she said. June helped her dig. Beneath layers of dirt and ash, they found it, blackened but intact. A silver heart on a broken chain. Inside, a faded miniature portrait of a little girl and the faint initials C.B. Clara Bell. Lily held it to her chest and wept. But the town wasn't ready to remember. Word spread quickly. A strange girl asking about a fire from 60 years ago. A man with an Eastern accent digging up ruins. Whispers returned. Ghost seekers, grave stirrers, devil's work. By the third day, their welcome had worn thin. A group of men confronted Elias outside the boarding house. One grabbed his coat. "You're digging into business best left buried." "We're just trying to give a child her name," Elias replied. The man spit at his feet. "She's long gone, don't wake the dead." That night, a stone broke their window, a warning. They were no longer safe here. But Lily refused to leave, not yet. "There's something else," she said. "Something I need to find." And in her voice was the certainty not of a girl, but of a mother. They returned to the site at first light, the sky smeared in ash and rose. Lily stood at the edge of the old foundation, fingers wrapped tightly around Clara's locket. Her voice trembled as she spoke, not in fear, but in invocation. "You were not forgotten," she whispered. "You will never be." Then she looked up, eyes fixed on Elias. "There's something still buried here, not just in the ground." Together they searched, sifting through soot, scraping aside debris. After hours, Elias uncovered a rusted tin box sealed with wax. Inside were scraps of paper, receipts, letters, a stained photograph of a man standing beside a porch. At the bottom was a folded page bearing Henry Bell's name and a signature, one confirming a new marriage license dated 6 weeks after Margaret's death. "Proof," Elias said. He moved on like nothing happened. They brought the evidence to the local courthouse. The clerk, an old man with a thick drawl and little patience, waved them off. "That man's been dead half a century," he said. "Ain't nobody left to punish." "We're not asking for punishment," Elias replied. "We're asking for acknowledgement, a record, an amendment." The clerk scoffed. "The dead don't get revisions, son." That night, something changed. The air inside the boarding house grew heavy, electric. The floorboards creaked as if under invisible steps. Lamps flickered. In the hallway, doors opened without touch. Whispers echoed faintly in the walls, words of warning, of pleading. "She's restless," Lily said. "She knows justice won't come." June sat beside her, hand on her shoulder. "Then we must give her what we can." The next morning, Elias stood in the town square with the photograph and the journal in hand. He read aloud to the crowd that gathered, curious, suspicious, wary. He told Margaret's story. Not as a ghost tale, but as a fact. She was born here, she lived here, she died here, and no one asked why. No one wrote her name, no one mourned her truth. Some scoffed, but others listened. An old woman in the back nodded, tears brimming. "I remember my grandmother mentioning a house fire. She always said something felt wrong about it." Elias passed around the locket. He let them read the journal, the letters. It was not a trial, it was not vengeance, it was remembrance. That night, back at the foundation, Lily stood alone. She pressed the locket into the earth. "Your name is known now," she said. "You're not a whisper anymore." As she rose, a gust of wind swept through the ruins, dry leaves swirling, the scent of old wood and lavender blooming briefly in the air. The silence that followed felt different, softer. When she returned to the boarding house, she collapsed onto the bed. and for the first time in weeks she slept without dreams. The next morning she found Elias at the table writing. "She's quieter now," Lily said. He looked up. "Do you think she's at peace?" Lily nodded slowly. Not whole, but closer. They left Knoxville that afternoon. As the train rolled away, Lily pressed her hand to the window, and in the reflection, for just a moment, she saw Clara, smiling. They returned to New Mexico in silence. The long journey across states, towns, and memories passed like a dream Lily couldn't quite hold on to. The land welcomed her back with familiar winds and an eerie stillness. Yet something was different. Margaret was not gone. She was quiet, yes, distant, but still there, still watching through Lily's eyes. And Lily could feel the weight of a choice yet to be made, a final reckoning neither of them could escape. Elias knew it too. He had spent nights poring through arcane texts, cross-referencing spiritual practices and ancient rites. Most dismissed possession as a myth, a metaphor. But the journals, the field records, the letters from forgotten monasteries, they all hinted at a possibility few dared attempt. A spiritual separation. Not an exorcism, not violence, but a negotiation of souls. "I've never done this before," Elias told Lily one evening, seated across from her in the parlor. "But I've studied cases. There's a chance, a narrow one, that we can divide you. What happens if we fail? You both remain trapped, or worse, you both vanish." June stood nearby, arms folded tightly. "There must be another way." "There isn't," Elias said softly. "Not if we want to save Lily." "And Margaret?" Lily asked. "She'll be given a voice, a space to choose." Lily nodded. The decision was made. They prepared the next morning, clearing the attic where it had all begun. Elias arranged candles, symbols, lines of salt. June remained downstairs, whispering prayers with shaking hands. Thomas stood on the porch, refusing to look at the house. When Lily lay in the center of the attic floor, Elias knelt beside her. "You'll need to meet her," he said, "not as fragments, not as shadows, but face to face." "I'm ready," Lily said. He touched her forehead and began to chant, an ancient invocation carried from desert temples and cloistered abbeys. The room dimmed, the air thickened, time seemed to ripple. Then Lily's eyes closed, and she fell inward. She opened them again in a space without walls or light, a place built from memory and echo. Before her stood a woman, not quite a reflection, not quite a stranger. Margaret, older, greyer, wrapped in sorrow like a shawl. Lily stepped forward. "You're her." "And you are me," Margaret said. For a moment neither spoke. Then Lily said, "Why me?" "Because you listened," Margaret whispered. "Because you felt what no one else could. I didn't choose you, Lily. We were drawn together. I needed someone open enough to carry the weight." "I'm tired," Lily said. "I don't want to disappear." "I know. Then let me go." Margaret's eyes filled with something too ancient to name. "I can't," she said. "Not yet." Lily's breath caught. "Why?" "Because I'm afraid," Margaret said. "Afraid that once I leave, Clara will vanish too. That her name, her face, her laugh, everything will be forgotten." "She won't be," Lily said. "I'll remember her. I'll carry her. I promise." They stood in silence again, two souls caught between life and death. "I don't know how to say goodbye," Margaret whispered. "You don't have to," Lily said. "You just have to let go." Margaret reached out. Her hand brushed Lily's. And the world began to tremble, the attic filled with a low hum, the sound of wind swirling without source. Elias remained steady, watching Lily's body twitch once, then still. The flame of each candle surged upward, then flickered into darkness. Lily gasped, her eyes opened, and Margaret was gone. Or perhaps she had finally rested. Lily didn't speak for a full day. She sat on the edge of her bed, her fingers tangled in the threads of her blanket, her eyes distant, blinking only when June touched her shoulder. She was awake, breathing, but somewhere far from the room. When she finally spoke, it was soft. "She's gone." June dropped to her knees beside her. "Are you sure?" Lily nodded. "I felt her leave, like a door shutting behind you. She didn't slam it. She just walked through." Elias stood in the doorway, arms crossed, exhausted. "Did she say anything?" "One thing," Lily said. "Thank you." The air in the house was lighter. The corners didn't feel so cold. Even the family dog, once wary, returned to Lily's side, resting its head against her foot as if sensing the shift. But something inside Lily remained altered. She wasn't the same girl who had drawn strange houses or spoken foreign tongues in her sleep. She carried an older weight now, like time had passed through her. When she spoke, there was pause, consideration. When she laughed, it came with a flicker of sorrow. "She's still part of me," Lily said. "Just quieter now, not a voice, more like a shadow, but not dark." "A memory," Elias said. Lily nodded. In the following days, the journal was closed and placed in a wooden box. June wrapped it in a cloth embroidered with lilies and tied it with a red ribbon. It wasn't buried, it wasn't hidden, it was kept, preserved. "She deserves to be remembered," June said. Thomas spoke little, but one morning he brought Lily a cup of tea and left it on her windowsill. She watched him walk away without a word, then smiled. It was a start. Elias prepared to leave. He packed slowly, unsure of how to part from something that had reshaped his life. "You could stay," June offered. "I've never stayed anywhere long," he said. "But thank you." When he turned to Lily, he hesitated. "You were brave." Lily gave a soft laugh. "I was terrified." "Bravery isn't the absence of fear," Elias replied. "It's doing it anyway." She stepped forward and hugged him, brief but real. "Thank you for listening. That's all I ever tried to do." He left that afternoon, journal copies in hand, knowing he would write her story, but not under her name. Not yet. Not while the air was still fragile. Alone in her room, Lily pulled open the drawer beside her bed and looked at the locket. It gleamed faintly in the light. "Your name won't fade," she whispered. "Clara." She thought of Margaret's last look, not of pain or rage, but of peace. And in that memory, Lily found something she hadn't felt since before the storm. Hope. Weeks passed. The ranch settled back into routine, though nothing felt as it had before. The silence returned, but not the oppressive kind. It was reflective now, almost respectful, as if the house itself acknowledged the journey its occupants had endured. Lily began spending time in the fields again, not working, just walking, watching, listening. The wind carried no voices now, only the rustle of dry grass and distant bird calls. Still, she sometimes caught herself turning at shadows, expecting to hear Clara's laughter or Margaret's voice. They never came, but she missed them all the same. In town, whispers still followed the Crawfords. Some eyes were cautious, others kind. But most had softened with time. People spoke less of witches and more of strength. They stopped crossing the street. They began nodding again, quietly acknowledging the family who had survived something none of them could name. Thomas spoke more now. It began with small gestures, leaving a book outside Lily's door, asking her to help mend a fence, handing her a sketch pad he'd bought in Santa Fe. One morning he sat beside her on the porch and asked if she still dreamed. "Sometimes," Lily answered, "but they're mine now." He didn't speak again, but his hand rested on her shoulder longer than expected. June had changed too. She moved with a lightness that hadn't existed before. The weight of her silence, years of it, had cracked during those strange weeks, and something gentler had taken its place. She hummed while cooking. She gardened again. She even laughed. And in the evenings, she and Lily read together by lamplight, sometimes passages from the journal, sometimes novels. Always with the same care, like every word was part of an invisible bridge between past and present. As for Elias, his letters came monthly, typed on fine paper, always addressed to L. Crawford, and always containing updates, his writings, new accounts, a few delicate questions about how she was feeling. One letter read, "I never intended to stay in one place. But now I find myself returning to that attic in thought, wondering if it is not the place that holds meaning, but the person inside it." Lily replied sparingly, but when she did, her words were precise. She trusted me, so I must carry her rightly. I will. She had begun writing again, though she didn't tell anyone at first. Her sketches grew bolder, images of women walking through fire, of children running through tall grass, of doors half open to impossible rooms. She never signed them. The journal remained in its box. She didn't open it anymore. She didn't need to. Its story had been told not just to Elias or to June, but to herself. And it had changed her. She no longer feared the mirror. When she looked now, she saw a girl older than her years, not haunted, not overtaken, but shaped, forged. A survivor of something invisible and deep. She sometimes stood beneath the dead tree in the north field and watched the sky. She didn't speak. She didn't pray. She simply stood. One afternoon she found a note tucked into her windowsill, the paper folded neatly, unsigned. She chose peace. Now choose yours. Lily didn't recognize the handwriting, but she smiled. She placed the note beside the locket and let the breeze blow gently through the open window. Outside, the land waited, alive, and finally, quiet. Even as peace settled over the Crawford ranch, not everything could be forgotten. The walls held onto secrets, and the wind sometimes whispered names through the cracks at night. Lily sensed it most on quiet evenings, when dusk turned the land violet and shadows crept long across the fields. She began to notice small things, a door that swayed gently though no breeze passed, a window latch that refused to stay closed, the faint scent of lavender drifting through her room without warning. Sometimes, when she sat alone in the attic, she heard the soft creak of footsteps overhead, though the house was empty. At first, Lily wondered if Margaret had truly left, or if part of her spirit had woven itself into the beams and floorboards, echoing for anyone willing to listen. She didn't fear it. The house felt less haunted and more awake, as if it had finally found a voice. But there was another presence, quieter still. One afternoon, as Lily sketched beneath the attic window, she felt a chill brush the back of her neck. She turned and saw nothing. Then she heard a faint sound, a child's laugh, distant but clear. The kind of laugh Clara might have made chasing sunlight in the Tennessee fields. It faded almost instantly, leaving Lily's heart thudding in her chest. She rose and moved to the old chest in the corner of the attic. Inside were remnants of her childhood, a worn doll, faded letters, a ribbon she'd once worn in her hair. Beneath them, she found the locket again. When she opened it, a strange warmth filled the room. As the weeks passed, Lily realized these small happenings were not meant to frighten, but to remind. The house, like her, was learning to live with its memories. Sometimes, in the early mornings, she glimpsed movement in the fields, a shape, pale and quick, darting between the rows of sage. Once, she followed it to the north tree, but found only the wind stirring dust at its base. Yet she felt watched, comforted rather than alone. June noticed the changes too. She would pause at a window and listen, head tilted as if hearing voices that slipped just out of reach. At night, she whispered good-night to the rooms, a habit she'd never had before. Thomas, though slower to accept, also changed. One evening, while mending a fence, he found a child's shoe buried in the mud. It was small and old, nothing Lily remembered owning. He cleaned it and placed it on the mantel, next to the journal box, saying nothing more. Lily sometimes wondered if what remained was unfinished business or a different kind of healing. The memories weren't just Margaret's or Clara's, they belonged to the house itself. Every scar, every creak, every chill in the night was a part of its story. But healing is never complete. One night, Lily woke to the sensation of someone standing beside her bed. She didn't open her eyes, but she felt a hand, light and soft, press gently against her cheek. A sense of peace followed, a warmth that pushed away every shadow. She whispered, "Thank you," and drifted back to sleep, knowing in her bones that she was safe. Days grew longer and warmer as spring arrived. The land outside flourished. Flowers Lily had never seen before bloomed near the porch, small, blue and white, with petals like folded paper. June swore she hadn't planted them, but Lily smiled. "Maybe they're a gift," she said. At dusk, Lily returned often to the attic, locket in hand, drawing whatever came to her. Some sketches were of faces she barely remembered, others of homes that no longer stood. But each page was lighter, freer, a record of living, not just surviving. She began to believe that the house would always remember, and that was not a curse, but a promise that no story once truly heard is ever lost. In the years that followed, the Crawford ranch changed hands many times. The old house stood against wind and weather, its windows catching the sun and its doors creaking open for generations who would never know all it had witnessed. Yet, some who came to live there spoke of dreams too vivid, of laughter echoing in empty rooms, of lullabies sung on nights when no one was awake. Stories about Lily Crawford grew into legend across New Mexico. People told of a girl who survived the impossible, who carried a mother's grief and a child's memory across miles and decades. Some claimed they'd seen her wandering the fields in twilight, a locket in her hand, her hair tangled by the wind. Others said the attic window sometimes glowed late into the night, as if someone inside refused to sleep until every name had been spoken aloud. Elias Blackthorne's writings became famous in certain circles. He published Margaret's story as a case study, changing names and details, but never omitting the heart of the matter. That sometimes the boundaries between the living and the lost are thin as paper, and all it takes is a voice willing to listen. His book was read in parlors and lecture halls alike, sparking debate and sympathy in equal measure. For Lily, life never truly returned to what it once was. She grew older, but not hardened. She married, had children of her own. She told them stories by lamplight, some about the desert, some about the ghosts of old houses, some about a little girl named Clara who loved wildflowers, and a mother named Margaret who refused to be forgotten. As she aged, her children would sometimes catch her gazing out the window, silent and thoughtful. When asked what she saw, she would only smile and say, "Just making sure no one is left behind." Her sketches lined the walls of the house, filling every corner with images of memory, burned staircases, giving way to fields of flowers, faces turned toward the sun, doorways opening onto new worlds. Visitors said they felt lighter inside those rooms, as if sorrow had been replaced by understanding. June and Thomas both lived to see their grandchildren play in the same fields where once only silence reigned. The past lingered, but no longer with fear. It was a presence, soft as the scent of lavender in spring. On her last day, June pressed Lily's hand and whispered, "Thank you for bringing her home." Lily never opened the journal again, but neither did she hide it. She kept it in a drawer, wrapped in the same red ribbon, a quiet testimony to what had happened and what had healed. On stormy nights, when thunder rolled over the hills and wind rattled the windows, Lily would sometimes wake to the faintest sound, a laugh, a hush, a name. She never feared it. Instead, she closed her eyes and let the echoes wash over her, a lullaby from another life. As time went on, the story of Lily Crawford became something more than history. Children grew up hearing it as a warning, a comfort, or a wonder, proof that love and pain could reach across time, that the past could find peace in the present, and that even the most broken hearts could learn to beat again. And so the legend lived on. If you felt the chill of Lily's journey, subscribe now for more macabre tales like this one. Every story leaves its mark. Every soul deserves to be heard. And if you want to uncover more haunting mysteries, click the video on screen to explore another true story from the haunted heart of America. Because sometimes, the most powerful ghosts are the ones we choose to remember.